Carcassonne. Yeah, and admittedly, the title of this video is a little clickbaity. How could one own literally every box of Carcassonne? Especially considering the franchise changed companies partway through its life, who then re-released most every box. So, look at this as more of a figurative statement. And well, maybe because for my sake I hope that my materialistic fiancé has purchased every box for this game.
Excuse me?
Love you!
The legacy of Carcassonne started with the basic box, which later came equipped with several mini-expansions, the river, the Abbott. Then came the big expansions, such as inns and cathedrals, traders and builders. Alright, just 1 second. The Princess and the Dragon, the Tower, which was just recently re-released, Abbey and Mayor, Bridges, Castles and Bazaars, and Under the Big Top, to name a few. Along with these came a flotilla of standalone games: Amazonas, Hunters and Gatherers, Over Hill and Dale, South Seas, The Discovery, and Winter Edition, to name a few. Not enough? Later, they packaged a bunch of expansions together and released a big box, each one including the core set with mini expansions as well as 4 larger expansions, and they didn't do it once. They made 6 of these thus far, and they were still not squeezing every drop of water from this stone. There are 6 mini expansions and this thing called the Phantom. Or you could just play Carcassonne. Honestly, it's a simple game with a few core rules to memorize. Even the innards of the box are unassuming. Unless your fiancé buys the insert. Okay, let's start with the basics. Each player places a meeple on the scoring track, then gathers the rest of his or her color. Place the start tile. Then the first player draws a tile and places it. Roads must follow roads, castles to castles. The point is to form a comprehensible and accurate, though somewhat surreal and illogical landscape of roads, rivers, and cities, the manifestation of which appear governed by Salvador Dali. It just needs to make sense regarding points. No engineers are getting fired today. Once you start a feature, you place a meeple, assuming the role of a knight, a highwayman, or a monk, and score points based on how many tiles the feature extends over when it is finally completed, or in the case of the Abbey, surround it. Score points, remove the meeple, and the game continues. The strategy comes from risk management. By placing a meeple, it is stuck at its location, unable to score points until the feature is complete, and the larger the feature you create, the more points you can earn. Though each round you don't earn points is a turn you don't have that meeple. Straightforward enough. There are a few additional small rules, but whoever has the highest points when the last tile is placed wins. As the core game goes, it's fun, and it set forward a genre other companies still produce for today. Arguably, one can claim Carcassonne was not the first tile-laying game, but it did become the most popular, taking its mantle as one of the pillars of classic Euro gaming, alongside Catan and Ticket to Ride. Or so say our Lord Will Wheaton. It's such an unpretentious concept, I'd go as far as to claim Carcassonne as a nearly perfect game. Practically flawless. Impossible to break. Then they broke it. I guess it was inevitable. I mean, there are like 50 Catan games. The creator of Carcassonne wasn't going to leave the basic game remain basic. Right from the onset, he began to bend a system that should have been left alone. One of the first involves this optional rule called the Farmer, a single meeple placed early in the game, which can, and I'm not joking, generate a number of victory points more than any other meeple you place in the game. Then came the river, 12 connected tiles that must be placed first before any others, creating an anchoring feature the rest of the game would follow. Such a successful expansion that all the core sets would include it. Then came the Abbott, effectively a super meeple with a specific set of rules. So far, these expansions were small, unassuming even. Then things got crazy. Inns and Cathedrals added the capacity of an additional player along with a new large meeple and 18 new tiles including said cathedrals and inns. These score extra points if utilized in a feature. That big meeple counts as 2. Traders and Builders adds goods, wine, grain, and cloth. 24 more tiles, 6 builder meeples, and 6 pigs. Bridges are a thing now. That's cool. When completing a feature, regardless of the meeple color controlling that feature, with one or more of these symbols, you gain resource tiles representing said resources. Players with the most tiles of a specific resource score points by game's end. The builder, placed alongside an identically colored meeple, can offer an additional turn to help finish a feature. Placing a pig alongside a farmer scores more points for that field. The Princess and the Dragon adds 30 tiles, a fairy, and a dragon. Place a volcano tile. The dragon appears, place a dragon tile. Said dragon moves. Each player has a chance to move the dragon up to 6 times that turn, as long as it never moves onto a tile it has been to that same turn. Any non-building meeples encountered along the way are devoured and removed. The fairy can be used to protect meeples and score additional points. The princess can kick out knights from a castle. The tower, which, like I said, was only just recently re-released, adds 18 more tiles, 30 tower floors. You also get this tile tower. An interesting concept, but one shockingly built with the same defect as one I encountered in Subterra. Like, precisely the same. Weird. At the beginning of the game, players receive tower floors based on player count. If a tower tile is placed, a player can, instead of placing a meeple, can set a tower floor. When a floor is put, a player can capture another player's meeple at a range depending on how high the tower becomes. Placing a meeple on a tower prevents its growth. Captured meeples can be traded or purchased back with points. The Abbey and the Mayor adds 12 more tiles, as well as the Abbey tiles, mayors, wagons, and barns for up to 6 players. The Abbey can be placed in any location that closes off a hole of 4 tiles on either side. Said Abbey closes structures off on all 4 sides. It counts as a monastery when counting for points. Mayors placed in cities possess a strength equal to the number of shields in that city, and if greater than any competitors, scores points for that city. There are also barns, which can be placed on the axis of 4 fields. They can be used to score instantly by farmers or kick farmers off a field. Wagons can be placed on anything but a field and can also move, so after completing a feature, it can move on to another one without having to be removed. Now, these are only 5 expansions out of the 10 available, and that's not even including those 6 mini expansions, like this one, the Messenger, which adds, and I can't believe this is a thing, a second point tracker. Players decide which scoring meeple to advance. If an active player lands on a dark space, that player draws the top messenger tile and either scores points or takes the action shown on the tile. End scoring is based on the total of the 2 meeples. As for the Phantom, and yes, my fiance has 2 of these, is a bonus meeple that can be placed on the same turn like a regular meeple. It's safe to say the more expansions you add to Carcassonne, the crazier it becomes. My fiance occasionally plays solitaire by assuming control of all the players, implementing all the expansions she owns. She never asks anyone to join her because she knows we'd all say no. The expansions don't necessarily make the game more fun, they just make it more complicated. Specific expansions certainly do make the game better. Sometimes added complexity is a good thing. The River expansion, Inns and Cathedrals, these are welcome additions, but so many of the others make the game Byzantine and unknowingly muddled. They became so unwelcome, many of these expansions became challenging to find as they were never reprinted, or were once and vanished soon after. Was there an answer to all this added convolution? Why, yes. Release a cacophony of standalone games that are incompatible with the core game or its expansions. Yeah, that's the way to go. So let's explore these, shall we? In Amazonas, you start the game with an oversized 2x4 river tile. Players receive 5 meeples, 2 tents, and 1 boat. The latter placed at the source of the Amazon. Like any game of Carcassonne, you draw a tile, place a tile, and optionally place a meeple. If you don't do the latter, you can move your boat 1 space. If you complete a feature, score points. You cannot place tiles below the level on the large Amazon tile. Only when the Amazon is extended via a special tile can the map extend downwards. Tributaries equate roads, villages equate cities, camps equate farmers. This is not a huge reach here, folks, though now there are symbols on the tiles that can alter the game. Oh wait, base Carcassonne did that too. At least you have the boats, likening to a race, scoring points as the Amazon expands based on the number of animals on placed tiles, and whichever boat is further along the river, receiving additional points at the end of the game based on who is further along. South Seas replaces the green fields with water, roads with bridges, and cities with islands. There's no scoring track now. Players receive wear tokens, which do mostly the same thing. The basic rules of Carcassonne apply almost verbatim otherwise. If you place a fishing boat, all fish are awarded immediately, and that player then covers a fish with a boat token, removing them from being awarded later. Completing an a market, grants a ship token, gaining those points. A ship can be acquired by trading wares. Points at the end involve both boats and remaining wares. Over Hill and Dale replaces cities with fields, has neither abbeys nor water, and is adorable. Players receive 5 meeples and 2 stables each. Meeples on roads can hike, moving across the road similar to the wagon in the base game. Completing farms gains tokens based on the symbols on the tiles. Stables act like abbeys, except they can be placed anywhere on a field. Points are based on the number and combination of harvest tokens as well as the number of animals found on fields, along with a number of other rules identical to base Carcassonne.
Beep, beep, beep.
The Discovery, notable as being one of the few games not designed by Klaus-Jürgen Reid, once again changes the outward aesthetic, removing roads but adding mountains, which are basically cities. Meeples look like they have their heads bitten in half. Although appearing as a much simpler game, the Discovery adds a layer of complexity by only offering players 4 meeples as well as the ability to remove meeples before a feature is completed. The removing of a meeple is an action and can be done at any time, scoring points when removed, with even more points scored depending on if the feature is larger than 2 tiles and or complete. The Discovery is one of the more interesting variants as it makes the base iconography and the legends easier, but adds more complexity within the rules. Hunters and Gatherers replaces roads with rivers, cities with forests, but also adds lakes and bonus tiles. If a forest completed by a player contains a gold nugget, that player can place a bonus tile, followed up with another meeple. Additionally, along with the standard 6 meeples, players receive 2 huts, which, when situated on a lake or a river, can score points for every fish along that entire river system. Farmers generate points based on animals found on field tiles, not cities, although the presence of a saber-toothed tiger removes a deer from potential points. The Winter Edition strips out all the expanded rules and is basically the core game with snow. No, serious, that's it. It's the exact same game. It's only white. It's like they stopped trying. Undoubtedly, there is a lot of Carcassonne, and obviously it would be difficult to collect every single release, especially considering the change in owners, re-releases, and the sheer number of products. 60 in total, if you can believe it, and that's not even counting re-releases or foreign language editions, which put the total count to, wait for it, over 130 titles. Forget squeezing water from stone. At this point, people are drinking the sand. And yet, through nearly every edition I could find, all of them still remain doggedly to the base rules, including the one no one apparently plays with verbatim. The rules is detailed in the game involving the drawing of one tile, then placing of said tile, inevitably creating a common slog in gaming circles known as analysis paralysis. As the game grinds to a halt and as a player examines the board, increasing in size and complexity, and ponders where to place the newly retrieved tile. A better option, and one literally every person I talk to utilizes, has the player removing the tile at the end of a turn, and consequently analyzing the board outside of a turn and cutting down on the time when it comes around to place the tile. In 20 years, they never bothered to fix this. There's no doubt that Carcassonne is a successful brand and a good game. That must be stated without objection. The expansions are impressive, but the ultimate issue is that, with the exception of a few games like the Discovery, there is a dogged refusal to alter the core tenets of gameplay. This has unfortunately left Carcassonne somewhat tired and unfashionable by this point. Tile laying is a huge genre, littered with hundreds of games, many of which borrow thematic and mechanical ideas with Carcassonne, and unfortunately in some cases make good games. Carcassonne could have been a brand, taking tile laying and building upon that with huge deviations from expectations, the likes of which we have seen in Acrotini, Eye of the Sky, or hell, Seventh Continent. Instead, Carcassonne wallows in a safe and shallow pool, comfortable not needing to swim. It's a fun game, but one I honestly no longer play. My fiance employs it as more of a zen exercise, like playing Bejeweled on the lowest difficulty, just for the purpose of creating something, as no two arrangements are ever the same. As such, she often doesn't even employ the meeples or score points. I find myself more interested in the offshoots than the core game, but even with those, there are so many better games in the market. So that's Carcassonne. One of the best games in history, and one that's been running in place since it burst onto the scene. There are many elements I'd still like to praise, and one must acknowledge its legacy. It's just depressing that said legacy is all it has left. This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina.